You are listening to Mining Stock Education. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Bill Powers, your host. If you haven't visited our website recently, please make sure you go ahead and do so. We have a new press release section up where you can get all your junior mining press releases in one location. It's right under the exclusive interview section at the top of our homepage. Also, make sure that you check out the SPROC conference. If you're not already registered to go, the SPROC conference at the end of July, I'm going to put a link in the show notes below, so please click on that link and consider going to Rick Rule's conference. This is one of the best. I'll be there, and make sure you say hi to me or shoot me a line if you plan on being there, and I'd like to meet you in person. One company that the SPROC group invested in late 2016 is one of our sponsors, that being Aton Resources. You can check out Aton Resources if you want to see that press release of how Sprott invested through a non-brokered private placement. Go to AtonResources.com and look for the press releases in late 2016 to read about that investment. Joining me today is Javier Orduña. He's Aton Resources Exploration Manager. Been on the show before. I got to meet Javi in Toronto at PDAC, but Javier, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, hi Bill. Good to talk to you again. It's good to catch up. It's a little bit warmer now where I am than last time we met each other in Toronto. But yeah, good to talk to you again.
Yes, it was definitely chilly in Toronto, but you're in Egypt right now, and your team is on the ground. You recently released some news about some grab samples at 2 prospects in your Abu Marwa concession. Can you review that for us and give us the significance?
Yeah, well, it's very early work at these 2 new prospects. It's the Safaga South and Wasif areas. Now, these are 2 new areas which we only recently discovered. Again, we identified them from reviewing satellite imagery. We picked them out as places to go and visit. They're at the far end of the license from Hamama, so it takes a long time to get out there, but we've had crews out there. We've been doing some preliminary work on the ground, only a couple of days, so it was really very, very preliminary, early sort of stuff, but what we found was pretty exciting and pretty unexpected. Certainly in the Safaga South area, we found a whole mass of veins and ancient workings, which, as far as we could tell, going through the data and the records that we have, again, it's another one of these sites that's not been previously recorded anywhere in the literature. So it was good to get out there. There was a photo of it in a press release, so there's clearly some significant workings there. And again, it came as a pleasant surprise to us.
Your Rod Rudin project, you identified that via satellite imagery where you saw the trails going up to the mountain. With this particular prospect, did you also identify that via satellite?
Yeah, it was a similar kind of approach, and as we've talked about, it's very effective in this part of the world where we do have exposure. We don't have a lot of rainfall, and features generally don't get eroded or weathered away like they do in most parts of the world. So it's a very effective technique. There wasn't an abundance of strong paths like we saw at Rod Ruin, which was significant. We don't have the archaeological remains which had been identified as at Rod Ruin, where we had the ancient processing site. But what we did find was these ancient villages. You could see remains of the ancient villages in the wadis, and as I've said before on other forums, people didn't live out in these places for no reason. It's not a holiday camp in these places. So pretty much always where you find these villages, these concentrated settlements in these sort of areas of the Eastern Desert in Egypt, it means people are mining gold. So it was a sign. It says let's go and have a look. So that was really the main driver. Plus looking at the satellite imagery and in terms of what we could identify from what the rocks look like. So that was what took us in there in the first place. Yeah.
And you sampled via grab samples up to 16.45 grams per ton gold, which is obviously very high grade, especially at surface. What's the significance of this? And if we're looking at your concession, what would be considered generally speaking, what would be an economic grade for an open pit mine?
Well, look, we went out at Safaga South. We took 12 samples, I think it was. They averaged 5.5 grams, above 5.5 grams. Half of them were above 5 grams. So they were selective samples. We're not trying to say they're going to be representative of any potential future ore resource, of course. But when you have quartz veins and which are averaging upwards of half an ounce, and then that's pretty attractive. Of course, it's very early days. We've identified dozens of quartz veins there, with some with old workings on them, some that didn't have. So some of them are exploited not in the olden days by the ancients. Again, that is generally pretty indicative that you're looking at pretty sort of high grade. So just as a very first pass evaluation, when you find gold mineralization at surface, it's only a positive. In terms of potentially economic grades, well, we've done a resource at Hamama West. We did our preliminary studies on the Hamama West oxide cap, which we submitted to EMRA, on which was the basis for us declaring commerciality, which is again an unusual Egyptian concept. But nonetheless, we did the studies which we submitted to EMRA, and the resource, I guess you could call it, looking at there, the potentially mineable resource, that had a gold equivalent grade, so gold plus silver, of 1.2 grams, of which that was about 0.8 grams per ton gold. And the preliminary economic studies we did on that is a tiny little return on that. So if we can economically mine gold, hopefully at Hamama West at 0.8 grams per ton gold at surface, if we're sampling quartz veins which are going half an ounce or potentially more, that can only be a good thing.
So we've shown over a large area that there's prospectivity over your whole concession. What are some people saying about Egypt right now? We've, on this show, talked about Egyptian mining reform and how that will be a positive impact for not only Aton, but other gold companies as well. What are people saying about Egypt right now?
Well, I think, we talked quite a bit just before Christmas. I think it was Christmas last year. There was quite a lot of noise on the mining reform. The government was coming out saying quite a few things, and it certainly looked like things were starting to move. It's kind of gone quiet in the last 6 months since then. It's frustrating, but it's probably not a huge surprise. Again, we're hearing, and we hear different things from different sources, so who knows what the truth is actually going to be, but things are moving forwards at a pace, and we expect to hear things moving towards some sort of clear resolution relatively soon. But whether that's 3 days or 3 months, or who knows, but things are certainly moving in the right direction with regards to reform. Clearly, when we talk about Egypt, there's two issues really regarding Egypt. It's I believe, and I think a lot of people believe, that it's a very attractive destination. It's certainly underexplored from an exploration perspective. But there's two main issues. One is the fiscal and the legal regime, which is problematic. Everyone is aware of that. Mark's talked about this, and there's no need for me to go into that. But in terms of a geological perspective, it remains a massively underexplored and very prospective part of the world. And it was interesting when I was at PDAC when we met in Toronto in March. There was a very interesting session by Howard Bills from Toro Gold, and he got together a bunch of a group of pretty serious generative geologists, and asked them a bunch of hypothetical questions about Africa under various scenarios. And one of the questions he asked was, where in Africa do you believe the biggest potential for big, greater than 5 million ounce gold deposits actually is? And if you take out all the fiscal, the fiscal regime and so on and so forth, in terms of the most likely countries to discover big 5 million ounce gold deposits for consensus amongst this group of guys that he got together, was Egypt and Sudan. So Egypt remains, I think everyone is aware, certainly in the exploration industry, that Egypt remains highly prospective. It's not the geology and the potential that's holding it back. It's legislative issues.
a few months ago, Aton offered a financing, and then a couple weeks ago, I believe, Aton announced that part of that private placement had been closed. Can you kind of give us an update on the financial situation of the company and any further plans for this year?
Yeah, well, it's been frustrating, as you would appreciate, for us and for a lot of people. We went out in January and we didn't raise the finance. We had some high net worth individuals who indicated that they were going to come in. Unfortunately, it wasn't possible at the stage, so we haven't been able to move it as forward as quickly as possible. We're close. We're very close. I think Mark's a person to talk to. He deals with the financing. Obviously, I deal with the geology, but I believe we're pretty close now. It's been a frustrating time, but hopefully we're going to close this round very shortly, and then we will be able to crack on.
So then perhaps after the closing of the private placement, a drill program would be announced, but as of right now, you're on the ground doing surface samples with the team.
That's right, yeah. I mean, obviously we have to, we can't commit to a major capital program like drilling at this stage until we have the financing closed and put away and we know how much we got to play with. That remains the intention. Obviously, we haven't talked about Rod Ruin here. The intention is to get back to Rod Ruin. We have a lot of potential all over our license area. And again, I think, these new discoveries certainly show that. But that doesn't detract from the fact that Rod Ruin remains our absolute number one target, and our intention is to plan up another drilling program and get going back down there again. But clearly, we're an exploration company. We don't dig gold. We don't make any money, so it's dependent on us spending other people's money. So until that money comes in, we don't know how much we've got, and once we've got it, put away, and hopefully we will be able to get back on ground drilling at Rod Ruin again.
Excellent. Well, thank you for the update, Javier. If you're interested in learning more, you can go to AtonResources.com. There, if you click on the recent press release from June 20, you can see some of the visual depictions of the prospectivity of these new prospects that Javier has and I have spoken about in this interview. If you have questions, you can email Mark Campbell, the CEO, direct. His email is mcampbell@atonresources.com. You want to engage the show, you can reach me at bill@MiningStockEducation.com. Well, Javier, thanks for coming on the show, and I look forward to touching base with you after those drill rigs get going.
Yeah, sure, Bill. It's good to catch up, and I hope we'll have some more positive news for you in the short term coming out shortly.
Thank you for listening to this Mining Stock Education podcast. Please subscribe and share with like-minded investors. Visit us on the web at MiningStockEducation.com for more resources on precious metals and natural resource investing. At our website, you can also sign up for our free newsletter for interview transcripts, stock picks, and more.